Marcelo Flores at one point in time was a big deal. You spoke about January camp. You guys are going to play against Guatemala. You called Marcelo Flores.
I heard a lot of things about Marcelo before I met him. In there, he's also talked about that he's Canadian, and as much as he committed to the Mexican national team, that he still is born in Canada, feels Canadian, knows a lot of the guys on the national team, and that's still in his blood.
This is Vamos, and I'm your host, Hercules Gomez.
Jesse Marsch, welcome to Vamos. Been wanting to get you on the podcast for quite some time. You've been very gracious. You're out in Italy right now. I am in Connecticut. How are you doing, my man?
I'm good, Herc. Great to see you. And thanks for having me on here today.
Yeah. Anytime. We got to get to the hard-hitting questions here. So I want to start off the hardest off the bat. Weston McKennie and Timothy Weah made waves in Italy when they said, the Italian food in the States is better than in Italy. You are in Italy, my man. What do you think?
They're crazy. They were going to the wrong places. I don't know that Turin is known for having the best food. I think here in Tuscany, we have great food. I'm not like in a city. I'm a little bit up in the mountain. I'm a little bit kind of separated from like the hustle and bustle of every day. And so we have a couple local restaurants around here, and the food is just phenomenal, right? It's all like grandma's cooking. And so they are wrong about the food in Italy.
Jesse Marsch says no pineapple on pizza. I guess that's the way we're going here. I enjoy my pineapple on my pizza, though.
Oh, no way.
Tuscan wine is beautiful. The culture, just the everyday life. How's it been for you and the family, most importantly? Because, it's a package deal. You don't come by yourself.
My wife had been in like a 5-year process to try to get her citizenship in Italy because she has distant family that came over. Shortly after I got fired from Leeds, we've got the word that she was approved for citizenship. So then we started thinking about, all right, where do we want to look? Where do we want to have a house? And where do we, find our European home? We even thought about Spain a little bit, but we're here actually just my wife and I by ourselves. All our 3 children are in either A-levels, university, or grad school in the UK. But, I think they all have Italian passports now. My wife has an Italian passport. I have residency. If I pass a fluency test, I can also get my citizenship. We've kind of made this our home now, and we're really happy to be here. And it keeps us, I think, connected with European football and everything that's happening here on this continent. So it's been great.
How is your Italian? Parla italiano? How's it coming?
Sì, un poco. Piano is what they say, So we've learned a bit and we've gotten to know some people in the community here. They always help us out. The most important thing is that when you go out to dinner, you can order some food and you can say hello and you know how to order good wine. And so if you can get by with that and you can get by socially, then you can usually manage.
Culturally, you've had the States, you've had Germany, you've had England, and now it's Italy. What's the biggest difference, life in Italy, for you?
Well, look, even when I went to the Premier League and they were like, oh, you're an American. And at that time, there was not another Premier League coach that had coached in more than 3 countries, right? And England was my 5th. I had culturally experienced a lot of different things on different places and different countries, and the way that people think about football, the way that they coach it, the way that they teach it. And at the core of all of that was my adventure to learn about not just the football in these countries, but like the people, right? And the culture and the language. So, Herc, I was lucky when I was young to be on the youth national teams. And it was like kind of took me out of Wisconsin and brought me to all these different parts of the world and opened up my eyes to what the globe, right? And that's the best thing about playing football, I think, is you have access to so many different kinds of people and different cultures, and you can learn so much from so many different people. But that kind of sparked my sense of adventure. And I even, as a player, I always wanted to go play abroad, but I never was really that good enough and never really had the right opportunities. And so when I had the chance as a coach, I was really excited to jump on it and to try to experience different things for myself, for my family. And I think overall that part has been really rewarding for us, and our kids have learned languages and cultures, and I think they've really been enriched by the overall experience.
You talked about culturally what the people are like. I'm curious if anything of living in Italy and maybe experience how the game is part of the everyday fabric there. Has that changed you as a coach?
It's a very passionate country, right? I mean, most Italians think Serie A is still the best league in the world, and you'll have a hard time convincing them otherwise. It's been interesting, actually, now that Jonathan David's gone to Juventus, because Juventus is kind of like Italy's team. And if you're not from somewhere that has a real strong tie with a certain club, then typically you root for Juventus. So where I'm at here, we're close to Pisa. We're close to Spezia. We're a little bit too far away from Florence and Fiorentina. So like everyone around here happens to be Juventus fans. And I thought I was kind of up here on the mountain and living an anonymous life where like nobody really knew what I did. And then when Jonathan signed with Juventus, I went down to the local town one day to get a coffee, and I had 3-4 random people come up to me and start talking about Jonathan David. And then I got invited to the local Juventus chapter for a match, and the president of he wanted to invite me and have me come. And I was like, and I told Jonathan the next time I saw him in September, I'm like, you've totally ruined my anonymous presence in Italy now where I live. But look, the people here, they love football. And this phrase that I already used, piano piano, it sort of describes the culture. It means like slowly, like step by step, we'll get there. Like, don't worry. And this is kind of how they think about football a little bit here too. Like, come back, defend. We'll be organized. We keep the ball in front of us. So it's a little bit of a clash to the way that I think, right? Which is like, go get them, kill them, press them, be aggressive. So, some of the Serie A games I watch, I get a little bit like antsy, like, come on, go after them. Like, but the game here is all, the best teams here are starting to play more aggressive and are starting to press more. But the general tactic is press high here in Italy. And then if you start to get beat, then to drop back into a low block and make sure that you don't give much away. So that part of the old Catenaccio days, I think, is still very present in Italian football.
Man, I got a lot I want to talk to you about in terms of Serie A, and it has to do with Jonathan David and Christian Pulisic, and we're going to get there. But just Serie A in general, I almost feel like the Italians feel like it's the best league in the world, but the rest of the world doesn't give it the recognition it deserves. I mean, we're talking about teams that have played in 2 of the last 3 Champions League finals. Atalanta ruined Xabi Alonso's perfect season with Bayern Leverkusen, and I feel like it gets disrespected a lot in the eyes of the rest of the world. Why do you think that is?
When I was young, like my favorite team was AC Milan, right? Yeah. And the reason was because in Wisconsin, I could, if I used the rabbit ears on the antenna well enough, I could catch a little bit of snowy rye television. And on Sundays, they would have the match of the week, right? And it was usually Milan, because at that time, AC Milan was the best team in the world. And they had all the best players in the world and spent the most money. And I think that a lot of Italians still have that nostalgic feeling of when it was definitely the best league in the world, and when all the players went to play in Italy, and when it had the most money and it drew everybody. And so I still think that there's a lot of really good football here and a lot of really good coaches, even at the youth level. When you see the youth games, which I've seen a few, like you can see that the game is evolving. It's becoming more dynamic. It's becoming more active. But the reality is it's not the best. There are good teams and there are good coaches, and they manage to do well against big teams. But their national team's not at the level that it used to be. Their league and the overall international competition still isn't what it used to be, which was winning Champions League almost every year. And England and Spain have certainly now taken a little bit more of the forefront on that. Even if you look at the European quotient, Italy's, I think, 4th now. So, it's dropped a little bit, but it's still high level football. And to do well here, you have to be a good player.
I think it was Cesc Fabregas not too long ago, the head coach of Como, who was talking about how he would love to use more Italian players on his team, but the development of youth Italian player isn't on par with the rest of the world. How he needs to go foreign because these young players aren't ready. In your brief time in Italy, what have you seen from the youth player that maybe you've seen elsewhere, that works elsewhere, that isn't being implemented?
They focus a lot on technique and fundamentals. They focus a lot on defensive principles, right? Because again, this is still what Italy is rooted in. But the idea of this like sprinting and attacking and being aggressive and pressing and playing up the pitch, it was a little bit more deliberate football, right? So I can see why Cesc Fabregas would say something like that. If you're trying to play modern football, I still think you need the types of players that have grown up playing a little bit more dynamic. But I do think that Italy in the youth level is implementing that more and more and more. And the games that I've seen now are becoming more dynamic. So I think that you will start to see that. Even if you look at the 21s, the Italian 21s team, they play pressing, active, dynamic, fast football. And I think that will be a bigger and bigger trend here in Italy.
All right, let's talk some Canada. We are officially 6 months away from the World Cup, my man. Let's dissect the group. For the sake of this argument or this exercise, it's Switzerland, Qatar, and let's say Italy in the group of the Canadian men's national team. Jesse Marsch, what do you see in this group?
Well, if Italy qualifies, I would say we have the worst draw in the tournament.
In the tournament?
Yes, because we go from being a pot one host nation to then having an opponent who would be pot one, another opponent, Switzerland, who would be pot two, and Qatar being a pot three, which basically would mean we'd be pot four, right? So it makes it very, very difficult for us. The draw has it does determine how, what your vision can be for what success can be. But I think that our team can compete with anyone. And certainly games against Italy would be very difficult, especially if it's the first match of the tournament for us in Toronto, where there's a huge Italian community, Italian-Canadian community. But I think it's a game that our team would be very much up for and excited to play. And even though it's a big challenge, like it's the World Cup, like it's supposed to be hard, right? I really respect the team that Switzerland has. I think they have a great coach in Joaquin. They have players that play at very high levels. And then Qatar, I still think it's a developing football nation, but it's a team that won't be easy to play against. It's another team that will be organized and a team that can run. So I'm excited for these challenges, but I don't think we got the easiest draw by any stretch of the imagination.
Italy's a team that nobody wanted to face, as that pot four, as that playoff team. Potentially Canada could face them. Switzerland, I just watched them in the summer pound Mexico and the United States men's national team. That's a very well-worked team and essentially always a next round team at the World Cup. They're always in the second round. And Qatar, when they had Felix Sanchez before last World Cup, I thought they were going to do well. And then, for lack of a better term, they didn't, and they screwed the pooch. They shat the bed in Qatar. So, but it's a team that at any given moment could maybe complicate things. You look at Mexico's group, you look at the US's group, those are much easier.
More manageable.
More manageable would be the word. More manageable. Who do you think out of the U.S. and Mexico got the more manageable group?
I mean, I think U.S.'s group is, it depends on who comes out of their European qualifier.
Let's say it's Turkey.
Yeah, I mean, Turkey's a good team, and this is a team that we could potentially play in one of the lead-up matches that we're talking to. So,
yeah.
And I really respect Turkey, and I think that they have a really good team. But if that's the toughest team you have to play against in the World Cup, that's not in a home World Cup. That's not a terrible thing.
It's funny that you say that the U.S. has the more manageable group. I kind of think it's a trap group, but I know what you're saying. It's the U.S. has. I dodged some major bullets. I dodged Italy. I dodged, a major, pot two team like a Morocco or a Norway. I just think the rest of the teams are saying, hey, I dodged Mexico. I dodged Argentina. I dodged, France, I dodged England, Portugal. So it goes both ways. I see what you mean by this. When I was playing with Toronto FC, I lived in Toronto. I lived in Yorkville, beautiful place in Toronto. I'd go out. I hear Italian everywhere. It's a mini version of Italy. What do you think that first game is going to be like if it is Italy in Toronto?
It'll be electric. I mean, it's going to be electric no matter what. But if it's Italy, it will be one of the biggest sporting events in the history of Canada sports, really. In some ways, I was asked, what if Italy comes out? And I said, this would be an incredible experience. It would be outstanding to play Italy in that kind of environment. We would probably, realistically, feel like it's an away match.
Wow. Yeah.
I know. In a home World Cup, our first match could very, very well be a match that is more Italian rooters or fans in the stands than Canadians. I've been challenging the Canadian community and Italian Canadian community to make sure that if they come to the match, that they show up and that they wear red and that they root for their country. But I've also heard from plenty of people when I've been in around Toronto, hey, shut up, man. You don't... You're not from here, man. You don't know what this is. So I get it. Like, I get it, right? We have the same in the States. We have the same kind of environments. But like, again, like, I really like the Italian team. They're very difficult to play against. They're very organized and disciplined, but we have a good team. And we will prepare for that match if that's who our opponent is. Look, we played Wales too, and Wales is a good team, and Italy has to go to Wales to get to the World Cup. So that's if they beat Northern Ireland, but that won't be easy either. And so Wales wouldn't be an easy match either, and for that matter, Bosnia or Northern Ireland would be fully prepared and organized and hard to play against. So I'm. Obviously, we're in a phase where we are doing a lot of preparation for what opponents we could see. And I remember this from 2010 as well, like really getting into the weeds about what exactly these teams are. So that's the phase we're in right now, and we can do it specifically for Switzerland and Qatar in the moment, and then we'll see who our opponent is. But in the end, like, preparing your own team is the most important, right? And making sure that at all levels, your team understands exactly what the expectations are and what we want to be, especially when the games get their toughest, which that's what the World Cup is. So we're lucky this year. We're having a January camp. So I'm leaving tomorrow, Herc, to go to LA, and we're having January camp. It's not a full squad that we have, but there's still a number of players there that will feature in the summer, and some that we're going to continue to evaluate. And, in that time as a staff, then we'll be together and we'll really be crunching through all the things that'll be important to make sure that we're prepared for the summer.
From a pure neutral standpoint, there are a couple narratives in this group that I think would just be phenomenal. Italian Canadians in Toronto, kind of having the Canadian national team feel what maybe the U.S. men's national team feels when they play Mexico in the States. That whole thing, I think, would just be electric and special. And also, if it is Wales that gets out, I mean, the head coach had some choice words about the way you guys celebrated, your friendly win. Like, that to me would also be like, all right, we got a little bit of popcorn here. But what I will say here, Jess, is I kind of feel like the host countries are getting screwed a bit. You guys have no World Cup qualifying. It's very difficult to establish, proper games going forward. And you have to wait to see who you play. And no matter who you play, those teams that you will play against would at worst be pot 2 teams. So I kind of feel like the host countries are at a disadvantage here, not knowing who they can play and prepare for. But I understand what you're saying.
Look, when Curacao and Haiti qualified, we knew right away that our chance of getting a manageable pot 4 opponent dropped. In general, these groups are easier than what it would have been like in other World Cups. We're playing at home. We should feel like we have a really, really good support. There's added pressure to playing at home, but I think we'll use it in the way to make us better and make us stronger. Canada as a home country in the last years has done really well in games at home. And since I've been the coach, we've managed to be really good at home. So we'll have confidence playing in front of our fans and in our own country. Like, in all ways, we're excited and we know what kind of opportunity lies in front of us. I think I've tried to really build this team to be more fearless. I mean, this is kind of who I am a little bit, you could call me naive at times, but I'm definitely not someone who is going to shy away from big moments, right? And so I've tried to continue to build that more into our team. Our players are playing at bigger clubs now, playing in a lot of our players are playing at Champions League clubs, which I think adds to the ability to understand how to handle big moments and how to handle playing against really good opponents. In all ways, I think this team is set up to be stronger and better than any other World Cup. And it's good timing given the fact that we're playing at home. So we're excited. Obviously, there's a lot to be aware of, but we're really excited and we're really optimistic about who we are.
Jess, you a baseball fan at all?
Yeah. You talking about the Blue Jays?
I am. I'm a Dodger fan. Yeah, I got Ohtani right here on the sleeve. I'm a Dodger fan, but I lived in Toronto. I got a certain affinity for the Blue Jays. I got a buddy who's on the. What I'm trying to say is I was paying attention, and I was in awe at how all of Canada rallied around the Blue Jays, and it got me thinking. Like, when it comes to national pride, we see it in the U.S., whether it's Olympics or any major tournament. The American crowd, if they make a run, gets behind them. Could you imagine the Canadian crowd, the fan base, the country getting behind your Canadian men's national team, and what that could do for you guys?
We played in November, right after the World Series, and obviously that was right after the Blue Jays, had lost Game 7, and I was following the Blue Jays, and I was rooting for them too. I mean, I've become a bit of a Canadian Herc, so
okay.
And I've really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed representing the national team. I enjoy representing the country, and so I was rooting for the Blue Jays. And then since then, there's a guy named Mark Shapiro that's the GM for the Blue Jays, who's a Princeton grad, and so we've been kind of connected. And so there's a lot of little underlying connections in there. But I came out after the World Series and said the World Cup in Canada is going to be even bigger, guys. So get ready, right?
Yes.
And I believe that.
For sure.
I believe that, and our team is going to show that. I know that we're going to have big support. I've spent a lot of time in the last 2 years or year and a half really trying to connect with the different communities. I took a coaching clinic tour across the country last year. I brought the team to train in Halifax. In all ways, I've been calling it the people's team. I've been making sure that our communities have better touch points with exactly what this national team is, with exactly who our players are. And I've tried to create a movement behind the team and a movement behind the idea of the kind of football we're playing. So, I think it's meant that there's real belief in the country about this team, that there's real excitement. I think TSN and a lot of the broadcast companies, Sportsnet, have done a good job of following our players who are specifically playing in Europe more and following the transfers and everything else. And I think soccer is bigger in Canada than it ever has been, and the team is better than it ever has been. And so, again, the timing, I think, is serendipitous, and I believe that we're in a moment of time where we can really capture the moment and create history.
How has the Canadian men's national team changed with Jesse Marsch? And I ask this in the sense of when people historically would look at Canadians, they would see politeness, kindness, Ned
what are you trying to say? I don't have that.
No. Jess, I think you're a great guy. But teams take on the persona of their manager, and John Herdman did, I think, a phenomenal job. Listen, you're going to find no bigger Canadian men's national team fan than I am. I've covered the team over the years, and I've seen the evolution. I warned Mexico and the United States about Canada before the 2022 World Cup cycle. I was proven right. I picked them to beat Belgium. They should have won. They should have beat Belgium. They outplayed Belgium. They did not. But I believed in this Canadian men's national team. That's John Herdman's group. Your group has a punch them before they punch you in the face type of thing about them. I want to go to the first game you coached with Canada against the U.S. men's national team. I believe it was Mikey Veras. He was the interim coach before they hired Mauricio Pochettino. I remember watching this game, and the U.S. treated it as a friendly. You guys did not. You guys put Christian Pulisic on his ass every time he touched the ball. There was a certain message about who Canada was and how difficult it was going to be to play against Canada. And I saw this at Copa America as well. What was the most difficult thing to change for Jesse Marsch about the Canadian men's national team, if anything you had to change?
I believe I've had an impact on the team, but if you really want to talk about what the best and biggest impact on the sport and on the CSA has been, it's been Kevin Blue, our Secretary General. The election of him put someone in place who is an incredible business professional, who has an incredible idea of how to create structure, how to drive success, how to raise funds. And he has changed the landscape for what is the potential of what the sport is in the country. And frankly, he was able to he's a big reason why I'm the coach, right? He came after me. He came up with creative ways to help pay me. And that has changed the idea of what success could be, right? So I appreciate everything that he's done, and he's the one that's going to really drive change. For me, you're right. John Herdman built a really good foundation with this player pool of now creating better professionalism, creating better discipline, creating better expectations, internal pressure to be better, to think about winning, to expect winning, right? And to create a professional environment when you came to camp. instead of it being a little bit like, a Band-Aid situation where they were just being flown into situations and sometimes not playing games, sometimes having to train in bad environments. Now it's an incredibly professionally run organization. And then all I've tried to do is tilt things more toward what I think modern football is and what the best games require. And that's the benefit I have, is the expertise of being in and around the best games against the best coaches and the best players. And now trying to take that and the lessons that I've learned from that and apply it to the teams that I coach. And with that, I always say is most people, when they watch the Premier League and they see it on TV, they notice the elegance and they notice the passing patterns and they notice first touch and weight of pass and all these kinds of things. When you're on the touchline and you're playing in these against these teams and you're preparing for these opponents and you're preparing your team for what these games look like, it's not the elegance of the game that strikes you, it's the speed and power that strike you. When something happens, it happens like that. And of course, it happens with quality and sometimes with great elegance, but the speed and power is unparalleled. The best players and the best games and the best teams, they have that. And so that's what I've tried to tilt our team toward more and more, is to use our athleticism to make sure we know we have an athletic team, we have a fast team, we have a powerful team. And what I've said to them is we always have to look like that. We always have to play like that. And that's what we always have to train like that and think like that. And so that's what I've done more than anything, is tilted our player pool to understand what the best players play like, what the best games feel like, and to make sure that we represent that in everything that we do. And through that, the players have developed. They've changed their expectation for what they think the game is about. And I think you've seen all kinds of players develop their game further. And I would take the guys at the top and say that it's benefited Alphonso Davies and Jonathan David. But then I would take a lot of guys in there that have grown into the system, like Natan Saliba, Ali Ahmed. I think Tejan Buchanan's continued to get better. Tani Aloisi, Derek Cornelius, Moise Bombito. You could go down the list of guys that have now established themselves at higher levels and now show that they can be incredible international players. And we have players now playing in Champions League, Serie A, La Liga, Liga, like at best leagues in the world, and performing with good teams and performing really well week in and week out. So that's the best thing that can happen for the national team program, and any national team program, is that your players have the opportunity to play at higher levels at a week in and week out.
All right. You spoke about playing against some of the best teams, best players in the world. Let's move forward to last Copa America. I think you guys are built for tournament settings. The way you play, how dynamic you are, how gritty you can be defensively. I think it's a tournament setting team. So Copa America, the success wasn't really a surprise for me. Hindsight is 2020, Jesse. Looking back at Copa America, the likes of playing against a Lionel Messi, I can't even begin to think of how challenging that is to set up a tactical structure to defend against a Messi, to defend against Argentina. Is there anything you would have done differently?
I think Argentina is a great team. I think Messi's the greatest player to ever play the game. But, that tournament was almost like just preordained, almost like the World Cup was before that, And obviously Argentina had to perform and win the tournament, and Messi made incredible plays throughout the process. But if you were around that tournament on the inside, it was like you could have, after the first match, I was like, okay, yeah, so Argentina's gonna win the tournament. I don't know if you remember, they came out at halftime like
late.
12 minutes late, right?
I do remember.
And the referee, I was looking at the referee going, what's going on here? And they were like, yeah, they'll make their way out.
It's Messi, let him do what he does.
Yeah, exactly. And what are you supposed to say? It is Messi, and the respect level we all have for someone like him is incredible. So I thought we played really well in the first match. I thought our match plan and how we tried to go after Argentina and make it difficult on them and then still build our process was really good. Then when we lost to them in the semifinal, the biggest thing that I was going through internally was Argentina had one more day than we did. They played a day earlier in the quarterfinals. We had to really exert ourselves to get to the semifinal, and every game was really tight for us. So we played the same starting lineup, and I kind of knew that we were at our limit physically, right? But we were going into the semifinal. We had a team that had earned the opportunity to play the best team in the world in the semifinal. And even though I felt like we should have made some changes and get some fresh legs into the team, I didn't want to deprive that group of the chance to see if they could go after it. So I knew before that we probably should have made more changes, but I also knew that that group had earned the opportunity to get there. And so, maybe I would have started with 2 or 3 more guys that had fresh legs, but at the same time, like it would have been devastating to tell some of the guys that had worked really hard to help the team get there that they weren't going to be in that match. So, but I think we learned a lot from that overall experience, and the guys gathered a lot of confidence in themselves and in what I'm trying to do with them to make them a better team. So that was an important time for us.
You're going to find no bigger fan of Jonathan David on the U.S. side than myself. I've been saying for years he's the best 9 in CONCACAF. There's some very good 9s in CONCACAF. He is the best. For my money, he's in the running of best player in CONCACAF. I think it's Christian Pulisic right now. But he's had a slower start to Juventus than maybe I would have anticipated, but not something that's foreign to him. He had a slow start in Belgium until he didn't. He had a slow start at Lille until he didn't. We know the story of how it went for him at Belgium and how it went for him at Lille, all-time leading goal scorer in Lille's, rich history. What have you seen from Jonathan David in this process of getting acclimated to Serie A and Juventus?
So first of all, off the pitch, he's moved with his girlfriend to Italy. He's kind of in this thing too, where he's adjusting to the food, to the culture, to the people, he found one apartment, then it was too noisy, he moved to another. So it hasn't been the easiest for him off the pitch to get settled. Even when he went from Genk to Lille, he's lived in the same small town. Because one, he drove 45 minutes the other one direction, the other he drove half hour the other direction. So he was living in Belgium and living in a very sort of little bubble that he had created, and he got used to everything about that area, and now he's had to move. But look, Johnny, I know Johnny. He is one of the most stable, easy people. He doesn't get fazed a lot by what people say. He doesn't get fazed about if things go great, if things don't go so well. He has an even way of dealing with life and dealing with his football. I've tried to just support him and say, keep going, man. And I saw him just about 10 days ago because they played here in Pisa, and I went and saw him after the match, and he came in off the bench and had a really good performance. Yeah. Then he missed a penalty against Lecce, and then last night or 2 nights ago against Sassuolo, he has a really good match and winds up getting a goal and assist, and now everybody in Italy here is like, oh, this is what we expected. And the whole time Johnny's just going about his business. Yeah. Yes, it's about every day kind of a little bit more, learning a little bit more, adjusting to his teammates a little bit more. Obviously, one of the best things that you saw, his teammates gave him the ball to take the penalty against Lecce because they know he's an important guy, and he's a very likable guy too. It's the same thing in our national team. He's one of the most well-liked guys because he's easygoing, he's really friendly, he doesn't have a big ego, he's a team guy. So now when he scores, he sets up a great goal, and then for Moretti, and then he scores another great goal after that. The team just erupts and celebrates with him. You saw Spalletti with him as well. So look, Johnny's gonna. People have asked me oh, Johnny's not playing as much. I was like, look, of all the things that we're doing to make sure that we're prepared, if Johnny's going to be ready and if Johnny's going to be successful and how Johnny's doing, even though he's one of our most important guys, it's number 1,000 on the list because I know him. I know him as a person, and I know how stable he is.
He's got a quiet confidence well, I shouldn't even say quiet, because if you ask him, he'll just tell you. I've asked him who the best player in CONCACAF is, and he'll say, it's me. But he does it in a quiet, confident type of way. I agree with you. I think he's going to be fine. It's funny because let's look at a guy like Raul Jimenez. I look at Raul Jimenez, and Raul Jimenez to me isn't a goal scorer, or isn't just a goal scorer. I think he's a facilitator. I see a lot of that in Jonathan David, but even more so, I question where Jonathan David's best position is. You coach him. You see him, more than I do in a training field. What's his best position?
Look, I think it depends a little bit on what you need in your team. because Johnny can do multiple things. He's not just a goal scorer, even though he's a great goal scorer. That's not the only thing he does. And so when I looked at the makeup of our team, he's too valuable in so many different ways about how we build up, how we press, how we, our tactical movements with the ball, without the ball. Like, he's a catalyst for what we do when we press, and he's a catalyst for what we do when we build and when we finish. And so, I've tried to find a way to use his abilities to the best to help support the team and the structure that we have, and to make sure that we're getting the best out of the entire group. And, look, if when he plays as a lone striker, I think the biggest thing that he does well and he understands is he comes underneath in the game because he doesn't want to. He's not the biggest, strongest, fastest guy, but he's smart. He's smarter than everybody else on the pitch. And so his ability to drift and move away from defenders so that he can find time and space on the ball and be connected, and then join late into the box to try to find space. This, for me, is still one of his best qualities. And it works really well for us when we have another striker that's along the back line occupying those defenders to give more time and space for Johnny to find and build the game for us. And then again, another bigger, stronger, more present striker in the box to also occupy defenders while Johnny can be moving around and find space. So for me, that's still, for what we need, the best way to use him. But like when Lil used him as a lone striker up there a lot and had a lot of midfielders moving around underneath him with wingers going 1v1, he was really good at that too. So he can play in multiple different ways, and it's more just about, like, for us, how to get the balance in our team right and how to get the best out of Johnny.
Yeah, last season for Lille, he scored in Champions League against Real Madrid, Atletico, Juventus, Liverpool. And the guy was ridiculous. A health update on Alphonso Davies from Jesse Marsch. What's going on with Alphonso Davies? How's he doing? Have you spoken to him?
He's really good. Yeah, he was actually just sick yesterday. They had a game against my old squad, Salzburg. They won 5-0 in Salzburg. But he didn't feature in that match because he was sick. He's back and feeling good, and he's had no issues with his knee. The Bayern Munich's been really happy that he's ahead of schedule. I think the break for him, having a little bit of the winter pause where he came back and was starting to play minutes and then has had a break and now will build up with a preseason, I think that's perfect for him. Because, Herc, a lot of times when guys come back from long-term injuries, it's not that actual injury that they're working back from. It's also like their whole body's acclimation to now the demands of high-level training and high-level games week in and week out. And often you see a hamstring injury or a quad or a calf. And so I'm hopeful that with him, because he's had sort of this return to play and then a pause and then getting back at it again, that it will help aid him in a full recovery and 100%, where the overall curve of him getting back to his best is as smooth as possible.
You just mentioned they played against Salzburg. I'm curious, do you keep in touch with any of your ex-players? I mean, some of your ex-players have been absolutely killing it now. Erling Haaland, I mean, he's been absolutely phenomenal. Brendan Aronson, he's been on a tear lately, which has been really cool to see, because he didn't have a good time this season to start off the season at Leeds. Not playing wise, but maybe with the fan base. So it's really good to see him and where he's at in his place right now.
So happy for Brendan. Like, what a great kid. Works his butt off every day. Cares so much about the team, playing for the team. No ego. Great family. Can't say enough positive things about him. So it hasn't been easy for him. I mean, look, he's been grouped in with Americans and the problems at Leeds, and throw it all out, right? Like, just let Brendan be Brendan. Let him play. Let him give everything he has to the team, because that's what he will always do. He winds up almost everywhere he goes, proving himself to every manager because of that. Because if you watch him train every day, you can't help but try to think about a way to use him and get him on the pitch, because you know how much he's going to put into it. And in some ways, it's almost like having an extra player. So really happy for him, and happy that Leeds has stabilized a bit in the season now and looks like they're in a good shape and a good way to continue to keep themselves in the Premier League and build off of that. I often say if I were to put together like my best 11 of players that I've coached, it's a pretty good squad, right? So there's a lot of guys in world football that are doing really well. And I don't ever try to take credit for the development of them. I just always when you have highly talented players, you're always just trying to unlock who they are, what they're really good at, and then find a way for them to fit into the team structure, but also for the team to understand how to reward these types of players for the kinds of qualities that they have. And there's a lot of things that people don't see in players. Like, they don't see that Erling Haaland is relentless in his preparation and when he goes to the gym and his rehab and his mindset to be the best player in the world. They don't see that Rafinha is a phenom in just how much he can run, how much ground he can cover in a match, how much sprinting he can do in the match. His sprinting numbers in a match are vastly beyond any other player that I've ever coached. They don't see the ability for Tyler Adams in every tight space to be able to cover ground with the first 3 steps, and make sure that there's no time and space for opponents when they play against them. There's just all these things that you learn about players and how they've developed and who they are, and you're just trying to find ways to reward them, and then how they can reward the team when you play with players or coach players like that, and when they have the opportunity for teammates to play with them. So, Szoboszlai and the things that he was able to do, Danny Olmo, Christo Nkunku, Upamecano, Konoté, Gvardiol. I've been really lucky in my career to coach some incredible players that all come in different shapes and sizes, and just trying to figure out how to get the best out of them.
Yeah, well, we're talking about some quality players who've moved on to quality setups, and you were instrumental in their footballistic and cultural upbringing. I'm curious, you've got a good grasp of North American coaching. Let's concentrate on the U.S. and Canada, if you will. Is coaching where it should be? And I'm not just at the professional ranks. I'm more interested in the youth levels, because, listen, I've got very young kids, 8 and 5, and trying to get into the game. And I see at the grassroots level the coaching and the understanding. And I've spoken to friends at later levels of what they go through. And I think about quality footballing setups. Spain, for example. Everybody in Spain is a coach. Everybody in Spain has a grasp of how they want to play with an identity. What's coaching like in North America?
Well, look, there's a little bit of an obsession with Pep Guardiola football now, right? and
I read
Spain.
the book, A Different Way of Winning. I can now coach.
Yeah. And look, I think Pep's a genius. I think he's the best coach that's ever existed, right? But Pep has created a model of football that's great for the best players in the world. Correct. Right? And the technically and tactically and physically most talented players in the world. That doesn't describe every team in every country and every player, right? There's different ways to look at the game, and there's lessons that can be learned from Pep. But I think that the mistake that gets made is too many coaches, even too many professional coaches, try to just emulate Pep and emulate Pep football. And by the way, in the meantime, Pep has evolved himself over time.
Of course, they are more pragmatic.
He's actually become more like a RedBul kind of coach. Right?
Yeah.
Or I said, one of the phenomena over the last 10, 15 years is that Klopp and Pep started like this, and they've almost morphed to become almost the same thing. Right? And so I think there's a couple things. At the grassroots level, there's an over-obsession with organization and technical training, tactical training, and I think that what gets lost in the process is the love of the game. So my son is now 18. I was fortunate enough to take him on this journey with me and watch what it was like when he trained in LA, what it was like when he trained in Montreal, what it was like when he trained in New York, what it was like when he trained in Leipzig, in Salzburg, back in Leipzig, in Leeds, in Italy, back in Leeds, and see the different kinds of training, the different kinds of emphasis, methodologies. And what I enjoyed the most, and what I think he enjoyed the most, was when he was in Germany. And when he was in Germany, they play small-sided till they're 14, 15 years old. So they don't play 11v11 until they're 15. They don't have referees in games. They don't have offside. They take goal kicks from the top of the box. When their training sessions, they had 4 training sessions a week at the small club he played for. One was just purely technical. right? And he hated that session, by the way. But that helped him along the way. And then the
Why did he
other
hate
three,
it?
because the other three were all free play.
Correct.
Right?
Okay.
They weren't being overly coached. The coaches would set up training and set up pitches and almost just let them free play. And there was minimal coaching actually involved. Now they were learning methodologies of, like, Germany is very technical in the vocabulary they use when they teach the game. Like, they use terms like rest defense. They use terms like counterpressing at very young ages, but they're almost like a fluid part of the way that they teach the game. So he had this, if you'd say in the week, it was 3 parts free play, 1 part technical play. That I saw his progression in the game the best in his time when he was in Germany. And so I still think that there's an over organization for North America. There's too much over coaching, especially at the young ages, not enough like really helping the kids just love the game and love being around the game and love competing, with little sprinkling in of ideas as they go along. Obviously, then this idea of technical training and what that looks like, the expertise of how to technically train a 7, an 8, a 9, a 10-year-old and how to put that into practice. And then as they get older, the thing that I think we lack and I think we emphasize too much is I think we emphasize so much passing, so much positional play, so much technical play. And look, at those ages, they have to learn how to build the game up. They have to learn what a 2v1 looks like, how to deliver a pass, how to catch a ball, all those things. They got to learn to do it and apply it at speed and at power with pressure and with reaction time. And that is technical ability, is the application of technical ability under less time and more pressure. And so adding that element in and creating a more dynamic version of the game, I think, is really important, which again, they would do really well in Germany with the way that they think about the game. In Germany, the pitches were longer and narrower. Right? And because they're trying to create more dynamic play and less side to side actions, right? And more vertical actions, force the kids to see things forward more. And if they lose it, then force them to make sure they're ready to counterpress and win it back. And thus then the overall pace of the game grows. So look, this all fits with my idea of what the game is and how to develop it. But it's everybody has to have their own vision, but like still this idea of love of the game first, growing the technical ability, but increasing the speed and pressure at which the game is played.
I'm very curious. You've got a very defined way of playing, big DNA to your game. How difficult is that for a coach? And I use Wilfred Nancy as an example. Wilfred Nancy has a way he wants to play, and he's not going to veer from that. And that cost him at Celtic. They lost 6 out of 8 games, but he was trying to implement a style, a DNA, a culture, if you will, to his ideas there. How difficult is that for a coach?
You used the word pragmatic before, and like people, like a big thing about when I took the national team was people told me you can't develop players and you can't have a style of play, right? Now we've done both those things and in limited time. So precision of what you do is important. Second, identity is incredibly important to what you do as a coach, but having it fit within all phases of the game and having a plan that is balanced in what you do. So whether you're a possession coach, a pressing coach, a counter-pressing coach, a set-piece coach, whatever, you still have to round out the way you teach the game so that you are good at all areas of the game and that you have a distinct plan that can make sure that you can maximize what you want your identity to be. And that is something that being in Europe taught me. So maybe I was a pressing coach when I was in New York, and I still was learning my overall pressing philosophies at that time when I left New York. But when you go to Europe and you play against really good opponents, you realize that if you don't have a plan for every moment of the game and a real idea of how to implement that with your teams, then you will suffer, right? And so you can't just be a pressing coach or a possession coach, you have to incorporate all of these things, and you have to be balanced and good at all of them, but still now know the things that are going to benefit your team the most. And so, like, look, I don't know how to. It was really sad and hard to watch everything that happened with Wilfred. And I like Wilfred. He was in the academy in Montreal when I was the coach at Montreal. I think he's a really good coach. Getting thrown into, I went through that at Leeds. Like, I had to go and halfway through the season, it was the first time I had to do that, and I had to be very precise and very pragmatic with everything that we did, right? And I had to constantly be looking at the team and I had certain players in the team that if the information started to be too much for them, then I knew I had to pull back a little bit and stick to the basics, because we couldn't overwhelm the group when we had opponent after opponent and big opponents coming our way. So your precision and your understanding of how to now create a philosophy, but then also how to take your team on a journey that makes them good at all moments and leads them still down the path to where they need to go. That precision is important. And frankly, like what I went through in Leeds, I use that blueprint a lot to help institute things with what we've done with the Canadian national team. And I think I've benefited from that, and the team has benefited from that.
Yeah, I mean, you had a tough act to follow in Marcelo Bielsa. I always thought that was very difficult as a guy that, was revered at Leeds and obviously used your time at Leeds to grow. It's funny because I look at you as a coach, and I always knew you would be a coach. When I was early 20s playing for the LA Galaxy, you were playing for Chivas USA. And in the offseason, a bunch of the local SoCal guys who were from the area, who played on other teams, Robbie Rogers, Sasha Kleshton, Kai Kamara, Aleko Skandarian, Chris Albright, yourself, and a few other guys playing within Major League Soccer would get together and do pickup at the then Home Depot Center, now Dignity Health Sports Park, and we'd play some footy. You would organize a training session. You were still a player for Chivas USA, and you're organizing a training session. And I was just thinking, yeah, this guy's gonna.
This guy's crazy.
Yeah, but I always knew you'd be a coach. Now I look at.
But it was good. Why we had good sessions.
Oh,
right?
Quality sessions.
Yeah.
There are quality sessions. I mean, you look at these players and some of these players and what they've done and who they are nowadays, and you could, iron sharpens iron type of deal. But I look
and I could pick the teams, Herc. That way I could pick the teams, so I make sure I got all the good players.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's the old man I see coming out right there. I did that towards the end of my career. I look at the coaching tree, Bob Bradley's coaching tree, and I'm sure it goes beyond Bob Bradley, but let's stick to Bob Bradley's coaching tree. You've got a Jim Curtin, a Chris Armas, yourself. There's going to be a few players. I would have thought Sasha Kleshton would have gone down that route. I'm sure there's one or two guys maybe that I'm missing. I could think of one that's going to go down that route in the future, which is Tyler Adams. He just screams it. There was one that while I was a player, I was his teammate, I had no doubt he would go down the same way. Michael Bradley. Michael Bradley is now the coach of RedBul New York. You know him very well. You've seen Michael since he was a kid. You're very close to his father. You played for him at Princeton. You're part of the coaching tree. How do you think it's going to go for Michael Bradley? What type of coach do you think Michael Bradley is going to be at RedBul New York?
Look, I've known Michael since he was like 3. So, I've known him a long time. The intensity at which he's always played the game, thought about the game, looked at the game, was always at such a high level. We all knew he was going to be a professional player. When he was 10, 11, 12, it was clear. And then, when he became a professional player, it was clear he was going to be a coach. So I think he has clearly the pedigree and the intelligence and the experiences. I also think in speaking to him in recent years that has a real humble approach to what he's trying to do. Like, he knows he has a lot, he has big experiences, and he's been around a lot of powerful personalities and coaches in the game, and he's learned a lot from all of them. But I think he also knows that like his ability to put it to practice and his methodology, that he needs to learn exactly who he is. He needs to learn exactly how he wants to lead and how he wants to coach. And I know he has a vision, but then the ability for him to put it all to practice will really dictate how successful he's going to be. And I think that more than anything, he's in an environment now with the New York Red Bulls where they believe in him, where they're going to support him, where they're going to allow him to make mistakes and support him to learn from those things. And they're going to challenge him about the things that are important in the game and what they believe in the company. And this is all, I know this because this is all the things they did with me. right? And I really give RedBul a lot of credit with me in their patience and their support and the way that they challenge me to grow and get better. So I think that Michael's in a really good spot. I think he has all the makings of a great coach. I think that he's going to take all of his experiences, whether it's his father for all these years, all the people he's been around, how he's played at the game at the highest level, and he's going to be able to put it all to practice in a way that represents him. And that was the only real conversation that I had with him was like, take time to really identify who you are. Right. Because I say this a lot. One of the mistakes I made early on was I was trying to be Bob. Right, I was Bob had such a massive impact on me as a leader and as a coach that in my early years of being a head coach, I was really focusing on what would Bob do and that's how he used to do it, and then I had to kind of learn from that and realize that I needed to be authentic to myself and I needed to find my own identity and obviously learn all the lessons from the things that I learned from Bob, but to put it into practice in a way that was uniquely me. And so that's all I said to Michael, right? Is just to take the time to really learn about who he is, about what he thinks, and to be himself. And if he does that, he won't fail. He will only succeed because he's an extraordinary person with extraordinary experiences and a great competitor and a very smart guy. So I'm really excited to watch his journey.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch Michael. I've got no doubt he'll be successful. If he puts as much passion and practice into his profession now, he'll be successful. It's funny you mentioned Bob. I always enjoyed playing for Bob. Bob, I think, has a bad rap in terms of personality or who he may be perceived as. I enjoyed playing for him because my role was always so clear. And as a player, when you know exactly what you have to do, it just makes your life so much easier. And I enjoy, this is who we are, this is what we're about, this is what we need to do. Don't fuck it up. I really enjoy that part of the game. It just makes my life easier as a player, I got to ask you, in my world, this U.S., Mexico type of world, Marcelo Flores at one point in time was a big deal. You spoke about January camp. You guys are going to play against Guatemala. You called Marcelo Flores. I used to play at Tigres. I know how much of a massive club that is, but I know how young players can get lost there. What do you see in Marcelo Flores? What are discussions going on like? What do you expect out of him?
I heard a lot of things about Marcelo before I met him. But, when I kind of came into this role, I really came in with an open mind to everything and everyone. And not that everyone talked poorly about Marcelo, but he was a confident young kid. And then because he was a good player, he went and played abroad and he was having certain successes and all of us, I think when you get thrown into the frying pan, you realize that, wow, man, this is heavy, right? And your ability to adapt and grow and be humble and commit to it again and go again and again and again. And everything that I realized when I met Marcelo was that for a young guy, he was pretty mature. And because he had some big experiences and some tough experiences, that he was forced to mature into a lot of different things. And so the conversations that I had were all really good, and I really liked him. Because he didn't lose his confidence, but it was more, I think, rooted in realism. He came into our November camp as a guest. I think he made a big impact on everybody, and he trained really well. I've asked Tigres to let him go, even though, they have matches during our camp. So it's not totally clear. Marcelo won't be there from the beginning. He's probably going to come a few days late at best and maybe really toward the end just for the match at worst, or at still a scenario where he can still be there. So being at Tigres, you're right. It's a big club. I've been down there a couple times with him as well, and the presence in Monterrey for what that team is and what the expectations are. The types of players that play in that club, the expectations from everyone that they win every tournament every time they play is at such a high level. And that means that for young players, there's not always as much time and energy around patience needed to help them grow. But I think Marcelo has learned a lot from being there. He's enjoyed it. He hasn't been negative at all. He's talked about what a big club it is. He's talked about what training is. He's talked about being around what those players is like and the coaches and the club. In there, he's also talked about that he's Canadian, and as much as he committed to the Mexican national team that he still is born in Canada, feels Canadian, knows a lot of the guys on the national team, and that's still in his blood. So, no decision's been made yet, but I'm continuing to try to give him the opportunity to see that being around this Canadian group of guys and this team is really special. I always say that the best resource we have as a Canadian national team is the players, because they're great young men. They care about the national team. They're really talented. They work really hard. They love each other, and he's really picked up on that. So this will be another opportunity, I think, for him to get to know us and us to get to know him. But I'm really hopeful that we're going to convince him to make the switch and come and be Canadian.
Jesse Marsch, head coach of the Canadian men's national team. Thank you so much for being on Vamos. We really appreciate your time, my man.
Herc, thanks for having me on. And I'll let me know if I can come back again, but it was great. Good questions. Great talking football with you. Keep going with your day job. And then we'll see you at the World Cup, my man.
We'll see you at the World Cup, brother.